Call the meeting to order at 6:03. Chris will be our minute taker. Before I take public comment, I just want to let everybody know under board management, I'm going to slip in an update from the Patricia Hannaford Career Center board as the new letter F, and then just slide everything else down and add an I at the end. So we're just going to slide it in under updates from the Patricia Hannaford Career Center. That's our one addition to the agenda. Okay, is there any public comment? Do we have any public attending, Patrick?
Kim Callahan is on Neat TV. So I can give Kim a chance to speak in case there's something she wants to say.
Go. Can you hear me?
Yep, I think we have you now, Kim.
Okay, great. No, I don't have any public comment. I'm just listening in.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you, though.
Okay. All right. So we have an executive session scheduled because we are under Title I, Vsba 5313A3, evaluation of an employee. That particular item requires us to determine that in order to go into executive session, the topic we discuss in public session would put the district at a disadvantage first, and then second to move into executive session. So because this is a matter of an evaluation of an employee, talking about it in public session would violate our agreed upon terms in the collective bargaining agreement. So that would be the disadvantage. So would somebody care to make a motion that given that fact, that would put us at a disadvantage and we need to go into an executive session?
So moved. Andrew.
Second, Sarah McLean.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of determining premature knowledge or discussion of the topic in public session would put the district at a disadvantage, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Now I need a motion, given that fact, to go into executive session under Title I, Vsba 5313A3, evaluation of an employee.
So moved. Andrew.
Second, Steve.
All right. All right. All those in favor of going into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. So we have another meeting link to click on. So we will leave this meeting and go to the other meeting and then come back into this meeting. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I think we got everybody back, right? Sarah McLean, are you going to have to like cut out of the meeting and then come back in? Because you said you weren't available till later.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, not now. Now you're cutting out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
I'm gonna have to leave. I was in executive.
Okay. Well, if you disappear.
Spotty internet.
Yep. If you disappear, we'll just watch for you to come back. Okay. All right. So we came out of executive session at 6:20, and I didn't say it, but we went in at 6:06, Chris. So I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Andrew.
Is there a second?
Second, Kristen.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Good. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Okay. Move down to executive limitations monitoring. The first item is an action item to accept the monitoring report for 2.5 emergency superintendent succession. Need a motion and a second, and then we can talk.
So move, Steve.
I'll second Andrew.
Right, any discussion? Okay, so if you want to do this by thumbs, that'll probably be easiest. Based on the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? All right. Okay, does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? Yes or no? Yes? Okay. All right. So all those in favor of accepting the monitoring report 2.5 emergency succession, superintendent succession, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Dave? You're muted. I didn't hear it.
Fine. Oh, Dave's muted.
Yes, I
Dave?
abstain.
You abstain? Would you like that noted in the minutes?
Sure.
Okay. Chris, did you get that? Okay. All right, next is update on the financial report.
I don't have anything to add. I know Steve had some questions, and I think Floyd's ready to respond to some of those questions, Steve. I don't know if you want to repeat them and we can walk through one at a time.
Yeah, I just trying to find the email I sent now. Realized I needed to get it up.
I could help.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, Floyd, that's fine. They're not complicated questions.
I'll just go down the list if that's okay, Steve.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. The first question was summary notes seem to have disappeared. That is true. We haven't added them for this cycle. They will be in the next set of notes.
Okay.
He asked about being early in the budget cycle, but are there any general effects on COVID on the budget? Before we get to the budget, let's talk about our audit, which reflects last year. There's going to be an effect on our audit because we can't get the information yet from the state for direction on how to account for some of these items. So that audit will stay open a little bit longer than we would prefer. It may close and then reopen. We don't prefer that as the method. So that's one effect that will happen, but not necessarily on this year's budget. Regarding this year's budget, the items that are reimbursable at 100%, we will start to chase after. There's a couple of schools of thought on repurposing funds and whether as a district we should seek to move forward with repurposing, and then the state would lower our education payment based on that amount. There's some downside risk to that in that there may be a disallow at the end after we've already had a reduced payment. We're looking as a group of business managers across the state to get clarity on that and to be relatively reassured that we will be held harmless, that if we have something that the state has said we can claim that then gets disallowed, that it will be on the state's end to cover that with the feds and not on the individual districts, as an example. It affecting our budget, more affecting our cash flow, the move by the government to, or by the state to delay towns having to report from August 15th to September 15th created a 30-day drag on our cash flow. In addition to that, we were one of the districts that had a town that had not yet submitted that data to the state, and we haven't received a state distribution for our education fund as of yet. What that means is we've hit our line of credit pretty hard, $2.9 million. We've had 3 payrolls come through that. So it's fairly substantial. Having said that, one of the conversations I had this morning with our auditor is, can we charge that interest as a COVID expense to be reimbursed? And he sees that as a path forward that's workable. Some conversation about, you had a question about the special ed block grant money, and you, just a refresher was your question. And before I just jump into that, anything specific, Steve, that you're thinking of there, or just really high level, broad brush?
Yeah, just that the amount of revenue appeared to be far greater than was budgeted. At least that's the way I was reading it. And I could be wrong, but I thought that we might have been making some allowance for that switch in funding mechanism, which may or may not have actually been passed yet. I needed to be refreshed on exactly what was going on with that.
And I think that part of the question is one that I'll delay answering and send a note out on to get on. You had some questions about expenditures that were that seemed to be a little bit out of whack, or a higher margin of a delta on it. One being the career change incentive for professionals. A lot of those dollars are still in the salary line and haven't moved over there. I think in the next income statement, it will be they'll be where they need to be.
Okay, so they haven't been moved into the right budget.
Correct.
Yet.
Yep. You had a question about interest on short-term debt. We budgeted fairly strong with the fear about we encumbered more than we budgeted because of our cash flow position.
So that's directly related to what you just talked about.
Correct. So we see that as sometime in the next couple of statements, you'll see that level out based on reimbursement from the state CARES money.
Okay.
Liability insurance, when we projected that last year, we projected $8,000 low based on the bill that came in. So now that's an actual, that is a real number that we are paying more than we anticipated.
Right.
Equipment, we needed a line to put some stuff like the isolation room we had to build, for example. And that again will be reimbursed with COVID money. So
other folks know that's like a $44,000 hit. That
yeah, and there's also another item in there that there's a floor machine that I don't think it was put in the wrong line. It should go over to the facilities equipment, and we'll make that adjustment.
Okay.
And that kind of punch lists your questions. Any others that have popped up, or anybody else?
I have a question with regard to SPED. So the line SPED expense reimbursement shows a favorable variance to the district of $261,000. It's a reimbursement process. So does this mean that there's going to be a clawback coming down the line because of the reimbursement process is a percentage type process of expenses?
I think if your revenue is inflated, it's an expectation of usage, which then creates a greater expenditure to justify that. So I think it's going to be a wash.
So I didn't get that. It shows a year-end estimate 1,000,009. The anticipated encumbered 1,000,006. You're saying that Well, if you would repeat that a different way so I might better understand it.
With special ed, we can book revenue based on expected expenditures.
Yeah,
So if we have a higher number than we originally anticipated, it reflects a higher anticipated expense line, which then drives the ability or which then drives the revenue line up.
so we have 261 additional dollars in revenue because our expenses were up and so therefore the reimbursement
For
is up?
example, to oversimplify it, if we have an out-of-district placement for a student at $300,000 per year and our reimbursement at 95%,
Right.
is 285,000, we would have to book the revenue of 285,000, but we really have a $300,000 expense that doesn't show up in the same way.
Where does it show up?
It'll show up down in the expenditure side, which is why you see more of a balance on that sheet.
So it looks like
Okay.
we're getting a windfall, but it's actually coming out in the.
We're not spending that money.
Okay. We're not spending that money because we're not really getting that money. We've already spent it.
Through for it.
Right. Okay.
I think it's also worth noting that it's September 22nd and we're looking at year-end projections. And if there's one thing we know for sure is our year-end projections are wrong. There's a lot more school year to go, and those numbers are going to shift significantly between now and then, most likely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get Floyd ready for his monthly grilling, that's all.
Bring it on.
It's a good warm-up, Steve. It's good.
It's early in the game.
You guys always treat us pretty fair. You ask tough questions, but they're good ones.
Krista.
I don't know, this is probably not the place, but at what point will we start to talk about next year's budget and COVID implications and all of that good stuff? So this is backward looking, but I don't see it on our agenda right now. So maybe it's tucked in somewhere I don't see it, or if not, is it appropriate to ask if you have any, quick things to share about what I know will be a much deeper topic as we move forward?
So October's the month that we'll really start digging into budget, and that's when we'll look for a budget target from the board, and we'll talk about some of the drivers and assumptions, and we've had conversations around these at really preliminarily. Dig a little bit more into that, so we'll revise some of the stuff that we've seen already. There is some favorable work happening at the legislative level. Nothing's concrete yet in terms of official action, but just that it seems like the direction things are going, like there's a bill that is looking to give forgiveness for students that enroll in home study. There's a bill, there are basically a handful of things, maybe 3 or 4 things that are in the works right now that are supportive of school districts in relation to the financial challenges created by COVID. So all indication right now is that at least for FY22, FY23 is a little bit further out and a little less known. Things are looking pretty good about school districts not having to sort of bear the entire brunt of the COVID cost, perhaps none of the brunt of those COVID expenses, which is great news.
Krista.
And if I could just follow on that, since our October board meeting may fall after some community engagement work for the long range planning, I wonder if it would be helpful to have or to commute. I'm guessing people are going to ask about this also. So maybe there's a way for some broad strokes to be provided as talking points.
Sure.
To be prepared for those meetings or that information that's going to maybe go out before we have our meeting.
Yep, we can definitely do that. We'll provide some of those talking points. We'll update a lot of the talking points we've used already. There may be some new talking points in light of things that are evolving. And I'm assuming the board's okay with that coming out through those community engagement events, knowing that we'll talk about it more in depth in our October meeting, then I'm comfortable with that as a course of action.
Steve.
So this is all listed at the end of the agenda, talking about next month's agenda. One thing that I was going to ask later on, but since we're bringing that up, what's an HCC report?
Hannaford Career Center.
Okay.
So that's when we would hear from the director of the Career Center about just sort of the financial plannings, and he may talk some about programming. So Dana or whomever the Career Center director is at the time.
No, I just missed the
He really
acronym.
comes with us, but that's what that is.
Any other questions around the financial report? Okay, keep moving along. An update on the strategic plan.
Yeah, so I guess the update on the strategic plan is perhaps twofold. The first is, in light of the way last year ended and the way this year is beginning, and how I suspect perhaps the bulk of this year may go, I made a decision, which was not entirely sort of alone. The action committee, see if I can remember it's been a long time since I've used these acronyms. Not the
Point or SWAT?
The SPOT, the Strategic Plan Oversight Team, thank you, had been meeting last year. They had 3 of the 4 meetings and were pretty clearly leaning toward this school year that is now started effectively being year 1.2 of our strategic plan implementation, because of the sort of monumental amount of work involved in the 2 objectives that we decided to start with last year. The one spin on that is the recognition that we need to do more work around equity. So it was basically year 1.2 working on the same priority objectives that we identified last year, but being a little more intentional about infusing the equity lens in those. So I made that sort of official determination, despite the fact that that oversight team didn't get to have its 4th meeting. And that's how we're moving forward. In addition, I think it's important to talk about the strategic plan and the role it plays with the ends monitoring report. So Katrina and I have been talking some, and both agree that we need to think pretty critically about what the ends monitoring report looks like, given the fact that some of the sort of key indicators that we would have pointed to in years past were not administered last year. And wanted to kind of hear the board's thinking on, basically for the board and Katrina and I to get on the same page about what that ends monitoring report looks like next year or next month when you would typically see it, so that we're all working from the same set of expectations when you get that report. I think keeping it relatively simple in light of the fact that we're missing such key data is important. And we can lean on some of the things that we know. So we can talk a lot about the work that happened last year relative to the strategic plan. I think connecting it to the strategic plan as much as possible and kind of having that be part of the story we're trying to tell with that report makes some sense. But it's undoubtedly going to look different and feel different. It would have anyway, but there are going to be gaps in information because we simply don't have it this year. Katrina, do you want to share any more thinking that you've done, or am I missing something that you may want to let the board know? They can kind of hear the board's thoughts on that.
No, that sounds about right. And I know we did talk a little bit about this at the board retreat. So I'm hopeful that this conversation isn't coming to you in a surprise at all. You know, the nice glossy reaching out to former graduates, we're not there for that, but we are definitely interested in updating you on the strategic plan work, because even though the committees weren't necessarily engaged from March on, the work actually, surprisingly, happily, has continued. So there are some silver linings during this work that we can point to and make very clear connections in the strategic plan to, especially in the area of curriculum frameworks, which fits nicely with the strategic plan goal around proficiency-based learning, and then a lot of progress in the area of social emotional learning that I think we can certainly update the board on. It's a little means, obviously, but I think where we are right now, that's what we can really report on as we move towards more more administration of some new ideas as the year hopefully starts to normalize just a little bit, whatever that looks like. The only second thing I would say is an update for you sort of on how has the beginning of this school year started, right? So just some general feedback. Again, it's not an ends report. It's kind of a mini means report, but if I were you, I would want at least a couple of data points, if possible, that we could provide about, how have kids come into the school year? What's that looking like? And what's our work ahead? So again, keeping it simple, probably in a mini, report from Patrick that I helped create with him. And, but I'd like to provide you with a little bit of data. It's not ends, it's means, but I think it would be helpful.
And I would just add to that in terms of how this year has started, maybe build that off of how last year ended and the work that happened to sort of spin on a dime to change so many things to try and meet a need, I think is part of the story that would be important to tell.
Do we have you aggregated some data on how last year ended and how it went in terms of, the number of kids that maybe didn't fell through the cracks or were able to, just, is there a picture we can paint, good or bad, of how that went? Just for
That's the tricky part. I can let Katrina elaborate, but so many of the end of year data points that we would look to see kind of where students ended the year didn't happen. So we have some beginning of the year and middle of the year, but if we compare those things, then that's very different than the data that we would have used historically. So it would feel apples to apples, but in effect be apples to oranges. So we don't want to be misleading with it. So those are some of the things that are a little trickier to put together for you to try and answer that question that you raised. Katrina, do you want to elaborate any?
Yeah, I've been working with the coordinators and thinking about what data sets do we feel confident in that are objective and not just qualitative. And I think there could be some pieces from the high school that can be helpful. Obviously, we graduated a class, so there's some data points there that I think we could feel somewhat confident on. MAUSD continue with their proficiency-based evidence collecting throughout the whole time. But K-6 is a little different. For those of you who have students or had students at the elementary school, you know that we went to a narrative report card. So it was extremely not necessarily based on, scores and that sort of thing. So the elementary school would be a little trickier, but there may be a couple of pieces from the high school, particularly from the graduating class, that we could pull.
Krista.
Although it sounds like this report might be more means-y than we're used to, I wonder if it might end up, I know for me, it might be a little more satisfactory in some ways. That tension of wanting to stay focused on the ends, but understanding better how we got there, I think is something that comes up a lot for us as a board, or I know it does for me personally as a board member. And I think it also, I'm wondering if I'm not alone, as far as the community goes. And so it could be a really good exercise to see how this works and helps us to build more of that story that the overall community can feel a connection to. Because our work ahead is going to be so challenging, and finding ways to give people something to hang on to that they can make sense of and see kind of behind the curtain a little bit more of all the work that's going in. I'm not sure ends reports have fully captured that to everyone's satisfaction. So, you know, it might be one of those silver linings where we can really end up with something that meets people's needs a little better.
Well, that could be part of the conversation during the ends monitoring report evaluation of what does the board think ought to stick in the future for ends reports, even when we have access to more robust data points. I think that's a worthwhile conversation.
And I would just add, I mean, the danger in that is that, you know, there's thousands of people's perspectives. You know, when you start collecting qualitative data, if you're not hearing from everyone, what's the slant that we're hearing from that may not be painting the picture for a majority of people who just aren't sharing. So it worries me a lot to go with, you know, what we think it ended up looking like when not everybody got a chance to tell us what it was looking like for them. And we definitely won't get to hear from thousands of people in the next 3 weeks about that.
Sorry, do you mean what their reflections are on the ends report, or what you provide for the ends report?
No, when you said, you know, some of this information, while it might be means-ish, I'm not going to be able to hear from every single person who contributes to that mean in our organization.
Right.
So that's always
Right.
what makes me worried. By relying on qualitative data from however many people want to give it to me, it
Right.
isn't necessarily going to give us the right picture. And you
Gotcha.
all know that from all the work you've been doing.
Got it.
So I'm just wondering, how do we address the policy language that says Patrick's not gonna get into the means, you know, there is that language piece, and how are we gonna address that? If we know we're gonna get something that's in the means line, are we gonna then turn and say, Patrick, you're not in compliance because you did the means? And then how do we address the fact that we're not in compliance because we went down the means as well?
If we
For me,
only
the
had
line-
nothing to say, unless there's a pandemic in the footnote, we would be fine.
For me, I think there's a clear line though. So I think, you know, 2.8, which is communication and support to the board, allows for me to explain to the board what some of the means are that are happening. I think when we start to violate policy is when the board is making decisions and directing me in regard to the means. So I think that's the line that we would walk, and I feel comfortable walking that line. I feel like this board is respectful of that line, and I think, you know, if I feel like we're crossing that line, I feel comfortable mentioning that, and I think it would be respected. So I'm comfortable walking down that path with you guys.
Okay, I just wanted us to, I wanted us to recognize that it's the means and remember our place, so that we're not, somebody isn't later saying, you know, wait a minute. Krista?
I guess for me, I feel more freed up to allow Patrick and his team to do what they need to do in the long range plan when I have the opportunity to hear some updates about the parts of that plan. And the strategic plan, I think, provides that. And if those updates are woven in some way to the ends report, or maybe it's not in the ends report, maybe it needs to live in a separate place, which is the strategic plan update. Wherever it is, I think it provides some confidence that, because it's hard to hear, you know, these changes are going to take five years or so. It's easier to hear that if we can see more clearly, but here's what we're doing year 1, year 2, year 3. And so in whatever opportunity we can do more of that, I think that's helpful.
There are folks who are on this call that can attest that I find it hard to say that as well. It's not just hard to hear. That change takes that long. I typically like change to happen yesterday, but I've come to realize that's not the way it works.
Dave? You're muted.
Yeah, so along the lines of what Krista's comments are, and I think we won't have SBAC scores this year, correct me if I'm mistaken. So the public, how do we know that our schools are doing a good job? How do we tell our public that the schools are doing a good job? And I look at 1.2, life and career skills, and it says, students engage actively in their own learning and pursue personal interests with self-direction, independence, and responsibility. Well, it doesn't show up on an SBAC test, and frankly, that's what the public in general judges the schools in this state about how they did on SBAC tests. So the silver lining, if you will, or perhaps what Krista is alluding to, is the fact that we don't have those. We have to get creative about how we're going to describe the success or lack thereof of our student body.
So as a person who has had kids in the school system during this pandemic, I mean, everything from this to baseball is going to have an asterisk, right, by it for this year. It's an outlier. Maybe some cool things will be developed, but anyone that would hold any school district's feet to the fire for academics for the past 6 months is completely unreasonable and out of line. And I would hope that they didn't do that to London during the Blitz or et cetera, et cetera. You know, I mean, we just have to really realize this is whack. And I think people are doing the best they can, families, school districts, teachers. And we just need to have some grace right now. And hopefully, you know, that's something we can consider.
Any other comments around the strategic plan? Anything, Patrick, do you need anything from us?
I feel like that's enough. That gives me, I think, what I need. Katrina, are you feeling good about what you have and direction for the end report? Great.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to update reopening schools.
Yeah, so by all accounts, things are going relatively smoothly, considering we are still in a pandemic and we're reopening in a hybrid model. So I think there's been appreciation for the communication. I think appreciation for the efforts to support families with childcare. Really just in general, trying to accommodate for a range of needs that individual students have, that individual employees have, that families have, and just trying to be flexible as we work through. So I think it's going relatively well, and it's really tough. In particular, I think at the elementary level, at the secondary level, there are a few more options available for remote support, thinking about virtual high school, thinking about the Vermont Virtual Learning Collaborative. Neither of those are options at the elementary school level. So when we built our system of support, sort of what we're calling the buddy teacher system or buddy colleague system, we built it when we had, I think, what were there, 16 remote students in total at the elementary level when we built this, Katrina, across the schools?
It was 37 across all the schools. The 16 number was specifically at Bristol.
16 at Bristol. So since then, we have 67 now, I think, all remote students, and 40 at Bristol. So that 40, when the system was built on 16, in particular at Bristol, is really creating some hardships. So teachers right now, even though with a buddy, are working to plan for the hybrid students that are in person, the hybrid students that are not in person on that day, and the all remote students that are remote 5 days a week. And that sort of work of keeping on top of those three sort of different groups of kids is really creating some hardships, and it's very much recognized. And that's what sort of has prompted our close look at, are we feeling like we have sufficient staffing to start talking about bringing students back for in-person instruction 5 days a week? Do we feel like we have our practices in place that can support that? And perhaps most importantly, does the public health data support that that's a prudent step? And I think with today's announcement of schools moving to step 3 in reopening effective Saturday, which more or less from a distance perspective says do the best you can to keep students at a safe distance, and continues with the masks and a lot of other procedures, we're feeling confident. We've been in conversation with the Department of Health. So every indication right now is that we can continue planning to bring, in particular at the K-6 level, students back for in-person instruction 5 days a week. So we're doing a little more planning on that tomorrow, and we hope that we have an announcement later this week about, I see some parents doing a couple double fists up in the air. I was putting your parent hat on, not your board member hat on when I saw that, just to call that out. But hopefully this week's announcement, which I think may be my last weekly announcement for a little while, will offer some more details on that. And this is all predicated upon something that Katrina and her coordinators have been building, and coaches, I think, as well, which is a virtual elementary school option. So for the students that are going to be interested in an all remote, so the options are going to be all remote or all in-person. Hybrid won't be an option going forward. It's too many systems to try and manage. But for the all remote students, they'll have this virtual high school, which will use our coaches, one classroom teacher as the instructors. Katrina is the principal of the virtual elementary school.
I prefer a member of the leadership team, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And you said high school just then, and he meant elementary school, I think.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Just checking.
Virtual high school rolls off the tongue more because that existed prior to now.
Yes.
So we were feeling really good about the planning that's happening, and we're going to put the finishing touches on that conversation tomorrow with the admin team, and that will provide the more detailed information that will go out in this week's communication. So things are moving along, and I hope that's well received. Obviously, there's going to be some hesitation with the idea of more kids in spaces together and what that will mean. But we will have all those other mitigating factors that we've had in place, masks and sanitizing routines, et cetera, that we can lean on. And all building principals are saying they feel really confident in how things are going and feel really confident moving forward. And in fact, we met as a steering committee last Wednesday, I guess it was, to have this conversation. And so the steering committee includes all of the admin team, but it also brings in the two union co-presidents, as well as some other sort of leadership positions. So Mandy is in as representing ELP. Kathy's on the team with food service. Floyd joins that team from the financial perspective. And
Bobby Joe
is in as the sort of guidance leader at Mount Abe. Am I missing somebody?
Bobby Joe.
And Bobby Joe from the HR perspective. So try to bring all those perspectives to the table in this steering committee, and pretty unanimously agreed, yeah, we're ready to start putting some specifics to this plan, and we're excited to be able to share those later this week.
Krista.
Just a couple logistical questions, which you might not have the answer to yet. Do you anticipate more than the 60 for the virtual elementary? Like, do you have the capacity if some people get sort of freaked out, if more people decide that's not for them? Will you have the capacity for that? Is my first question. And my second question is about, I thought I heard something today about congregating in group spaces, and I didn't know if that also was going to be happening at elementary and or Mount Abe.
So the capacity question is, we do anticipate more all remote people, as all remote students, as we're talking about bringing more students back together. The virtual elementary school that Katrina and her team are working to build, we feel has a capacity of about 100 students. So we have some room to grow, and we feel like that's a pretty safe number. And if we see something that is surprising to us in terms of the number of students that are interested in that, then we'll have to regroup and think about how do we address that. There comes a point at which, if enough students want the all virtual option, there may be some ways to combine the in-person options to free up some more personnel to help accommodate the need for the all remote. So those are some of the things that we'll be playing with as we watch those numbers. But we feel like we're pretty strong in terms of getting something started, and we can adjust accordingly. And the second question was, remind me again?
About congregating in spaces like cafeterias and gyms.
Right.
And
so step 3 does allow a little bit more of that. And we'll have to take a look at that guidance closely again to see what that means. One of the things that we have been looking at, and this is something we hope to include in the communication, if not use of the cafeteria for eating lunch, at least use of the serving line to serve the food and not deliver the food to classrooms. And it takes some of the logistical lifting off of that. Having said that, we are going to look at, given our numbers, like, can we have some limited use of the cafeteria for meals? I think that's a possibility we'll need to look at. But again, we'll look very carefully at the guidance for step 3 and what it allows and doesn't allow for. We'll think about what then also passes sort of the common sense test, and try to find some ways that can solve some of the logistical challenges that we're a little bit concerned about, and bringing more students back and trying to keep everybody safe.
Okay, anyone else?
Good luck.
Thank you. It's exciting. I think everyone's really looking forward to getting students back for more in-person instruction and just be back together again and tending to needs. And we will, we're not forgetting about the 712. The guidance in moving to step 3 does provide some opportunity for that. There are some logistical scheduling challenges with that. There are also bigger bodies. There's a little bit more to think through at the 712 level, but those conversations are beginning. And we're trying to think about what could it look like, what would it take to do it well, and what might the appropriate timing be for that. So those conversations will follow. We just don't have a lot of details yet on what we'll do there.
All right. Great. All right, keep moving on through the agenda. I don't see anybody. Our next item is board management and governance. First action item is to accept the monitoring report for 3.1 unity of control. Is there a motion?
I'm happy to do that, Sarah LaPearl.
All right.
Motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second Andrew.
All right. Any discussion? Okay. So based on, I'm not seeing anybody, based on the information provided, does the board find that the interpretation is reasonable? Yes? All right. All right. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring report for 3.1 unity of control, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So the next one is a monitoring report for 4.1, and is the correct one there now? No, it's still not. Okay, so we don't have the correct one for that. So we'll just need a motion to table that until the next meeting.
Move to table to the next meeting. Kristen?
All right, is there a second? All right. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of tabling 4.1 governing style monitoring report till the next meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right. Next is an action item to appoint a voting delegate for the VSBA annual meeting on 10/20/20. I was expecting Kevin to be at our meeting tonight because I believe, Dave, this is the meeting he was going to nominate you for as a voting delegate. Is that correct? Is that the way you understood it?
Yes, that's the way I understood it.
So we have, Dave is willing to take on the responsibilities to be our voting delegate at the VSBA annual meeting. So if someone would like to appoint him.
I make a motion to appoint Steve.
All right. Is there a second?
Second, Kristen.
Any discussion?
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. All right. All those,
Deeper and deeper.
all those in favor of appointing Dave Sharp as our voting delegate for the VSBA annual meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? All right. Update from the Community Engagement Committee.
Okay, I'm going to put in the chat a link to what I wrote to capture our update because we have a lot to share. And I'm going to look to Kristen and Liz and Andrew to chime in as well. So I thought I'd kind of run through the different things we're working on, and then we can pause and go back to some places where we are looking for feedback. So first to start, we had some help from, lots of help actually, from Ian and Ray Albinson. Kim Callahan and Kristen took the lead on putting together 3 video shorts to help us tell the story of our long-range planning process. The first video just went out. We learned, I think, some things about the process that we will fine-tune for the next go around. So there'll be 2 more videos after that one. The scripts for video 2 and 3 are being worked on right now. But the idea is that we want to provide a quick and snappy way for people to begin digesting kind of where we are, and with some teasers to stay engaged in the process moving forward. We're also working on a trifold mailer. So recognizing that not everyone may be accessing information via a video or the website, we want to capture some content in a mailer that will go out to all registered voters, directing them primarily to our website, and but providing enough background info so again people can sort of get a sense of this story of where we are, the opportunities for input, and a call to action for people to engage in the process. So Sherry Bedard, who worked on the new district logo with us, and also the marketing materials for the fall engagement events last fall, is working with Kim Callahan to put that together, but the content is coming from Don and Patrick and myself, and I'm going to share out the draft to everybody here and to the Community Engagement Committee for another pass. The deadline, though, is the end of the day tomorrow. And so the things, if you do have the opportunity to look at it, and again, several board members have already taken a look at it, and Patrick, but the things to be thinking about are whether this mailer provides enough information for the community to understand where we are in the process. Is the tone the right tone for this mailer, and does it capture how we envision this process unfolding? So again, it's going to be a trifold mailer. The formatting will probably get tweaked a little bit. Don't get too hung up if you're going to look at it on the formatting or the imagery. It's really, you know, just look at that content, and does it tell that story well, or are there any critical pieces missing? Again, this, as with the video, are directing people to our website, and we're going to need to do some work on the website to make sure it's an easy to navigate bucket to put all kinds of information. Kind of like how we did with our refining how we share budget information to the community. We're going to have to try to figure out how to share many levels of detail depending on people's interest. And so I think we're going to try to see if we can't put some kind of button on the homepage that directs people right to the place on the community engagement website where all of this info will be housed. And so the mailer is going to direct people to that. The third thing we're working on, so we are, trying to get info out to people with the mailer and the videos, and then we want people to have an opportunity to digest and dialogue around that information. And so with Sue McCormick's help, we're going to host a virtual town hall. So she's going to help us figure out the format for that. Where we're going to offer it on 2 different days and times with the same content. So giving people 2 different opportunities to participate. So hopefully it will weave in a way to, again, share all this information, but with a person delivering it and then giving people a chance to ask questions about it and engage with it. And through all these 3 things, we are working people toward the community survey that's going to go out at the end of October. So, so our committee's broken up into some different work groups, and the community survey group is really trying to stay focused on what the goal of this survey is, which is to figure out what to put before voters that will get a yes vote. Recognizing that this year it may not just be a budget, but it might be a budget and something moving us toward a long-range plan for our schools. So we've identified some questions based on what was talked about at the retreat and with the community engagement committee. And we're looking for feedback on those questions. The turnaround time for that feedback is a little bit longer. We are imagining that the survey itself will go out at the end of October, so we've got a little bit of time. But if you open the link to our update, you'll see what those questions are. And so for this and any other places where we're looking for feedback, I think the best way is for folks to email me directly, and then I can compile all of that and share that with the group working on the survey itself. So in addition to these questions we're considering for the survey, we're also going to have some demographic questions. And then you can see on the update what our timeline is. And we're really grateful to be getting help with the survey design from Rob Backlund's wife, Meredith, who does a lot of survey design in her work at UVM. So I think we've been really lucky to have the help of Kim Callahan, who's a PR and marketing person, and Sherry Bedard, and then Rob's wife, and different folks in the community that have expertise that individual board members may not have. And if we had the money to have a PR and communications person in our district, that we would probably do that through them. But since we don't, I think we've been really appreciative of these folks' desire to just sort of dig in and really help move this work forward, because it is a really big, heavy lift. So before I pause and see if Kristen or anybody else has anything to add, and then we can talk through some of this, I would just invite other board members to see if any part of this is something you want to jump in on planning or thinking about. And but at the very least, if you can carve out time for one or both of those virtual town halls, to please do so. So that's a lot. So I'll stop there and maybe first see if Kristen, if you want to add anything on the video piece.
We're just trying to be, we were told to be concise and fun. So we're trying to do that. And I think while it's nice to have professionals involved, it's also good to make sure that we don't get too glossy, which certainly the videos aren't, you know what I mean? Or too, to just keep it real, and so that, people can relate to the material, whatever it is, and understand it easily, like you said. So no, I think that the committee's working hard, and yeah, we've got a little more time to work on the other 2 videos, and I think it's going well. But again, I really want to thank Ian and Ray, and I didn't know if we had anything in our budget to compensate them for their time, which is quite large. That was something I wanted to bring up.
We could look at doing some sort of at least acknowledgement of their volunteerism. Gift card or something like that. Floyd and I can talk with you more about what might make sense there.
I watched the first one, Chris, and I thought it was very well done. I really liked the tone. My computer kind of coughed on the Vimeo video a little bit, but I thought it was good.
So way back
Kristen-
at the beginning, you mentioned you were going to do a mailer to all voters. So that would miss some people. Then it would put multiple pieces of mail to other addresses. There might be a better way. Moncton in particular is very difficult to mail to, since there are 5 post offices involved and 5 zip codes involved in mailing to Moncton. 911 addresses would probably be the greatest coverage, hit the greatest number of households in the district. I don't know if you have access to 911 addresses, but mailing to voters misses a fair number of people and sends duplicate mailers to certain addresses.
Thank you for that feedback. I know very little about how best to send out mailers to as many people as possible. So hopefully with the help of maybe the town clerk and with what we know as a district that we've done, and with that advice, we can figure out the most effective way to reach the most number of people.
We've sent mailers to the 5 towns in the past, and we work with the printer usually, who is in concert with, I think, town clerks. And when we've done that in the past, I haven't heard, I didn't hear anything about duplicates, and I didn't hear anything about people not getting it that were supposed to. Doesn't mean that didn't happen. But we had no evidence that it was unsuccessful. So we would probably just follow that same path unless something presented as an improvement for us.
Kristen, I don't think I included in the update, but can you just let people know what the the general theme for the second and third video?
Yeah, the second one is the data, sort of the reality of where we are now with using all the data we've had in the past several months. And then especially in regards to budget and population and some stuff from the NESDEC report, such as capacity of the schools and things like that. And then the third one is going to be, we're calling it opportunities. So that will be more looking at the options that that are available. And we actually, I mean, I don't know if from the feasibility committee, we will have more information from them about things being whittled down in about 2 weeks when we work on that script. Do you think we would, Sarah? In about 2 weeks, have more information from you guys?
So we're meeting, I think October 5th. I might be wrong about that. And yes, we're working on a matrix. And then I think we're mostly, I'm gonna maybe speak for Patrick here, but I'm pretty sure that we're gonna hear from where it whittled down to through Patrick to the board before, like around then too, right? Or in October.
Yeah, so the homework assignment from the facilities study committee was basically to use this matrix that looked at the various options sort of on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis were the community values and some other aspects to consider about each of the options. And so the homework was for the committee to kind of go through and try to whittle down some of those options using those values and other factors. And that would be sort of the final and perhaps most key piece of input from that committee to me to inform my recommendation to the board. But I made it clear that I wouldn't be giving effectively my recommendation to the board to the facilities committee, because my directive is to give that to the board. So I want to make sure that I'm respectful of that directive from the board and not sort of prematurely produce that that recommendation.
I think one thing that I just want to speak to, Krista, is that as a board, you know, we're presenting information in these videos and mailers, and we're not supposed to persuade. We're supposed to take in the information and output a decision, or I guess you'd call it a decision. And I think I just want to make that clear to the community members on the community engagement committee and everyone, that we're gathering information, and that's what we're doing. And then we look at it and have a process to come to a conclusion of some sort. So I think that's important for everyone to know, right?
Right, and that's law. We can inform, can't sell.
And I think that that's where that committee gets different than most committees, because some people on that committee who are from the community have strong opinions about things. And so as a board, the board part of the committee just has to be informative and not opinionated, I guess. And that's fine. Everyone, I mean, we all have our own opinions, but we have to leave those at the door when we come in to judge the data in a fair and as fair a way as we can.
Liz or Andrew, did you want to add anything?
One question I had was I got two emails from Jennifer with the link to the video. One of them I think was just to correct the link to the video, but is that something we're supposed to be posting? Because it didn't look like it went out to like the world. How is the video getting shared?
It should be going out to the world, so it should end up on Facebook, Front Porch Forum, emails.
Okay.
All the usual places except the text messages. I started trying to whittle down the message that was really important to go along with the video. And I'm limited to such few characters in the text message option that I was going to completely annihilate that message that was so important. So I ended up not sending the text, which is unfortunate, because I think for a lot of people, if it comes directly to your phone via text and you touch the link and it opens up, you're probably more apt to see it and share it. But I wasn't comfortable hearing what is probably 600 characters down to 120 characters and taking out some really important content. So it did go out a little differently in that regard than some other videos have gone out.
John, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Should we spend a few minutes talking about the survey questions, or just have that continue to be feedback that comes via email? And that seems like it's a little more discussion. Well, maybe not. I guess we've talked about it in other places, so.
Well, and I'm wondering, did people sort of look over it as part of the preparation for the meeting tonight? Did you look over the?
Probably not, since I just sent the update out in the chat.
Right.
So, okay, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on anything? Sounds like there's a timeline for feedback tomorrow for one piece, and then a little more time on the feedback for the mailer. And then I think the
Actually, the
next-
mailer feedback needs to come tomorrow.
Oh, that's tomorrow. Okay. And
Yep.
then,
And then the survey is a little bit more flexible.
okay. All right. So Krista's going to gather that feedback and on both those items and send them off to whoever's working on it. So if you want to send it, go ahead and send it to Krista. Okay. All right. I'm not sure.
I can do it.
You can? Okay. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I was like, Kevin's not here. So update from the Facilities Feasibility Study Subcommittee.
So we just met. I think one thing that would be interesting that might tie in with Krista's comment about the survey was we really continued to keep going back to the triad, and if you can only have 2 legs of the stool, which 2 legs would you have? And so while asking all those questions, and everybody might say either straight yeses down the row or straight no's down the lines, if you, in addition, had to prioritize, if you had, which of these are the 2 most important out of the 3 legs of the stool on the survey, might be another way to put the question, because we definitely keep touching on that in our committee meeting. A couple of things we went through in our last meeting, a lot of questions that one of our community members on the committee had presented. And so Patrick kind of went through all of those answers, and we came back to the matrix, and we didn't fill in the matrix as a group, but we really looked at the parts where we were mostly responsible, and then tried to think about, you know, there's some aspects in the matrix that have, you know, were more focused from the Community Engagement Committee, and then others from, I don't know, I guess probably the members of leadership, I would guess. And then, but we were putting in our own thoughts about where those were at any rate. And then all of the proposals from NASDAQ were sort of sorted and tried to be aligned as best as possible with our proposals or our thoughts behind it. And I think that's kind of where we went to, and really looking back at the values and what we were trying to link it all together with. But we have a little bit of homework, and then I think we're pretty much gonna wrap it up. So it'll be on our plate. But it was a good sounding board for a bunch of people to talk through things and listen to Patrick kind of talk through some work.
One of the things I would add to that, what came up in conversation was sort of around the idea of timeline. This board has directed me to give them my recommendation, but that directive stops short of a specific date for me to provide that recommendation. So I want to just let you know what I'm thinking, and then if that's off, we can talk that through. I'm thinking December. The December meeting is when I would bring the recommendation to the board. That gives the board an opportunity to hear it in December, talk it through in December. If need be, we'd have time in between December and the January meeting to have another meeting to talk it through further before the board would need to act at its January meeting. I think November's a little too soon in terms of being responsive to the survey feedback and to put together in a really informed way using that feedback and all of the community engagement work that's happened to date. So I just want to make sure that we give it the time it needs to develop a really sound report that includes, or a recommendation that includes all of that input, which is why I think December is probably the earliest that really makes sense. So if that seems way off on your thinking, that would be good for me to know.
One question I have is, there's a list of essential questions in the charge. Is there going to be a formal response to those questions?
So I think some of those questions are going to, I'll get some help in answering from the facilities committee. I think some of those other questions have specific answers that can be given. And frankly, I think some of those questions don't really have answers, but are questions that need to be sort of philosophically considered as a recommendation is being made. So part of my plan is to provide a recommendation that tries to address those questions, maybe not answer them because they may not be answerable, but to include those questions in the recommendation.
Would it be possible to sort the questions into those categories in the report and give that opinion in the report? In other words, if you think it's not answerable, can it at least be discussed as to why it's not answerable and what the ramifications of different political views might be on that question?
Yeah, I think that's possible. That has been my thinking is, there'd be some response to the question.
Right.
That response is an answer or just additional thinking. I think depends on the question.
Okay.
The questions were sorted for us to kind of go through. So I think we have a responsibility with the committee to answer the three. We have three down at the bottom. There's a few that are embedded that we're getting the feedback from the survey, from community engagement, and then there was the whole set from the administration. So it's kind of been part of all these different lenses coming together. So I think they'll get answered the best they can be answered.
I know there's been some push or some discussion about putting this all off. And is there going to be some response to the ramifications of that? If that's an option, what are the ramifications of it? And is that's simply part of the don't do nothing option? Is that I'm assuming there's going to be some data around that.
There's quite a bit of data around doing nothing. And so it comes back to the three legs of the stool. And so the cost is, and I might get this wrong, but it's over, I think it was $1 million a year for over 10 years, additional every single year to cut. So we don't really have a choice to sit back and do nothing unless people want to pay more money. And so that's where the survey questions are going to inform us of that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not so much saying that we would just ignore the problem forever, but I think some folks have expressed their anxiety about the current situation with COVID and piling all of this on top of that situation and whether or not, what the ramifications might be for delaying this for a year, just to get COVID behind us or something.
$1 million.
So I'm working on a response to some of that, and hopefully it will go out in a wide, not just a response to certain individuals, but a more broader response out to the community as well.
Okay.
I know there was some talk at our last community engagement meeting, can we trust the numbers that you guys have? And as I talked to Floyd yesterday, I didn't exactly know this, but part of getting NASDAQ to do what they did, a slice of it was to see if the numbers that Floyd and Patrick and Katrina have been giving us are, the projections are within reason. And so he said that that was vetted by the NASDAQ information. Would you say that's true, Sarah? So that's some supporting evidence that these numbers are in the ballpark.
Yeah, the NASDAQ study doesn't give us a plan. In some ways, what we keep having problems with is that it made more options, but it does provide a different way of, I guess, evidence. It's different evidence from a different source to say essentially the same thing. We have declining enrollment.
And I think it's important to acknowledge the there's no precision to the numbers we have now. There are precise formulas applied to create the numbers we have right now, but there are a lot of projections. I wouldn't want people to get hung up on the specifics of the exact dollar amount. I want people to pay attention more so to the trend, right? So our trend for the past how many years, several years anyway, is projected to continue over the next 10 years. Whether it's 900,000 or 1.2 million each year that we end up having to cut, hard to really know because there are too many moving parts. But in the grand scheme of things, whether it's 900,000 or 1.2 million doesn't really matter in terms of the trajectory that we're on and what that's going to mean for kids. And so I want people to just keep that in mind as the numbers are going to shift, right? So think about a single budget year. The initial projections tend to change from October to November to December to January. We're trying to do this out 10 years. So obviously there's a lot of variability, but what doesn't seem to be wavering at all is our trend line.
The only other thing I would also add into, I just forgot what I was going to say, is that we don't want to be in a position where we ask one town to do something and then the next year have to ask another town to do something and then the next year ask another town to do something, and that we're not actually, we're just like band-aiding off the problem. Like if we're going to take one, if we're going to have a plan, it'd be nice to actually have like a good solid plan that will work for a longer term than 1 year. So I think that's one aspect of what we've kind of talked about at the facilities feasibilities committee.
And I think along those lines, something I've been thinking about, and it's a concern of mine that I think is important for this board to wrestle with, and has implications for the community engagement committee, et cetera. If that plan does involve the closure of more than one elementary school, and that is the vote that goes out before each of those communities, however many that might be, and say it's two, if one community says yes and the other says no, I have this growing concern about the impact that has on the relationship across towns in our district. And so if town A says, yes, we vote to close our school because we think this master plan makes sense and it's sustaining our district, et cetera, the other town votes no, one town loses their school and the other town keeps their school, and everyone benefits equally from the economic savings, though not as great as we had planned, still something. And I'm concerned about the possible resentment that may surface and the impact that can have on our community as a 5-town community. So I think it's worth thinking about that and how we might mitigate that, if there's a way. But that's just a growing concern of mine that I think more people thinking about would be helpful.
I would add to that, Patrick, that my concern too is that if town A says we'll close and town B says we'll close, that doesn't matter what they say. What happens at the polls matters. Town A goes and says, no, in fact, we're going to keep it open. And then town B says, well, we said we were in agreement that we were going to do this, and then you changed your mind. That who we hear from are not the folks who actually show up or really represent the folks that wind up at the polls.
Liz, you had your hand up.
The only other thing about delaying the vote, I feel like I would be concerned because I mean, possibly we even get a couple months and have a vote in June or something, but I worry that the most number about not getting as many people to show up to vote to represent the community well. So I feel like it is important to have it on the day that everybody is more likely to be there and more likely to be able to give their input on what they want to do. So I think it's really tight to put anything out there, but the community engagement, it feels like not very much time, but I wouldn't want to limit the number of people that we're going to be able to participate.
Krista, you had your hand up. And then Steve will go next.
Just a couple things. One, when you were saying, Patrick, about your concern in mitigating some of that, you know, I do feel like the communication piece of this is so big and important, and I worry about our capacity, like, to turn this around so fast. And I just wonder if you're probably already thinking about this, how likely it is that we won't get a yes vote, and that this is going to take multiple attempts, and that we're going to have to be building budgets with that in mind. Because I know we have to do this now, but I think it's a big lift.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. What's interesting, you know, thinking about what you're saying, a no vote to any question we ask has the same effect as not asking the question from an impact on the budget and impact on programming perspective. So I'd rather ask the question and get a no than not ask the question. And I think I completely agree. It's a heavy lift. And I think it's one we have to shoot for, but I think it's prudent to think about that concern of the potential sort of conflict within our 5 towns, and what's our obligation to mitigate that, what options exist for us in mitigating that, and considering those options, and thinking about the best course of action forward on that. And it's something I've been doing some thinking about. I need to think more on it before I, you know, state anything publicly here. But I think if we get more people thinking about it, then we can put our heads together and really try to get ahead of that, whatever that might look like. Because I think that would be so damaging. I feel like we've come a long way in a few years in rebuilding our sense of community and shaping that sense of community to extend beyond our individual towns into our 5-town community. And how we handle this has the potential to unravel a lot of that, and that would be unfortunate.
Steve?
So just in terms of timing for execution, I mean, even if we heard this recommendation in December, we decided to move forward with it and put it on the ballot in March, you're still going to have a budget cycle that's going to be impacted, you know, with what you see coming forward in the next year, maybe 2, before we can actually execute the school closing. So people are going to get a good taste of reality of doing nothing, just in terms of the time it takes us to get it done. There's going to be a budget cycle 1 or 2 where you're not going to see savings because we haven't executed it yet. And you're going to have to make the budget balance without incurring a penalty. So we're going to get to see what the implications are in reality, even if we move as fast as we can. And in terms of pitting one town against another, I mean, one simple solution to that is we don't close any schools unless they all agree to do what the recommendation. You basically say, if everybody's not in, then we're not all in. I mean, that would be one way to handle it.
I like that in concept. I'm not sure how that holds up in the actual balloting and all that. Maybe there's a way to connect the votes that if one fails, they all fail.
Right.
To explore that a little bit more.
Yeah. Dave had his hand up as well.
So I continue to see the closing of a school as an extraordinarily difficult thing, and that won't get a positive vote, at least from the owners that I speak to. The notion of utilizing all the buildings in new and creative ways seems a step that we can take that will A, save some money, and B, move the community closer to thinking about all of our students together.
I'm not seeing anybody else. All right, thanks for filling in, Sarah, with that update, and everyone else. Yeah, a good conversation. Okay. Patrick, you all set? Okay. All right. So Kevin's not here, so we're gonna skip the legislative update. He did send an email out, so check your email and you might find some information there. And that leads us down to the next item, which was a Patricia Hannaford Career Center update, and Steve's going to take that.
Yeah, so I'm sure Dana will, if he's going to be giving us a report next month, we'll probably dive into this somewhat, but it was my first board meeting there, and I was reading their minutes and I mean the director's report that they provided prior to the meeting. And as it turns out, I think because of the switch mid-summer to the hybrid model, Patrick, you and Katrina can probably correct me here, but it sort of ended up changing the way that the pre-tech junior high was able to, their schedules no longer were able to sync with the Career Center. This affected about 19 kids, and they were primarily, I think, in the animal sciences and agriculture classes. I might have that wrong, but it was also a bit of a budget slam for those folks, which they may be able to recoup along with the same expenses that we're recouping due to COVID. But it was sort of an alarming topic because they'd done so much work the year before to get all the schedules all synced up. And now, I think they just, everybody's hoping that this is really just a one-time deal, that things will be able to be moved back into sync after the teaching schedules get put back to normal. I'm sure Dana will have more to talk about next month. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it, because it was kind of reflecting on Mount A. Virgins has been able to make some kind of an adjustment to it by having some staff from the Career Center embedded in Virgins. And Middlebury, I think maybe just because of their proximity, was able to handle their schedule a little easier. So we tend to be the outlier in the situation.
Yeah, and I can explain that a little bit. And you sort of touched on some of the different factors. Virgins has for some time had some Career Center programming embedded in their building. So in a way, they have a proximity benefit similar to what Middlebury does. Additionally, Middlebury didn't really change their schedule. They're kind of locked into a schedule given their IB programming. So Addis Northwest and Mount Abe are still in sync. We made the same change to our schedule effectively.
Right.
The reason for the change was, so historically kids would manage 8 classes, 4 classes on an A day, 4 classes on a B day. Both Virgins and Mount Abe felt that kids managing 8 classes in a hybrid model when they're only in person 2 days a week was too much to juggle. And that was the feedback they got from the spring as well. So they went to what's called a 4x4 schedule, which keeps it so kids only have to juggle 4 classes at a time during this hybrid reopening. So that was the impetus behind that. It was known that there were going to be, 1 or 2 dozen kids in the pre-tech classes, so mostly underclassmen, 9th graders and 10th graders almost exclusively, I think, that were going to be impacted. But for the 650 kids that would benefit from that 4x4, it made sense to continue with that move. And we didn't have the proximity benefits that Northwest and Central had. And that's the impact. It is, and full disclosure, one of those kids impacted was my own daughter. So it was not lost on me what that impact was on kids, but in the grand scheme of things, that's what made the most sense for the general population. And it was my understanding that those kids will have an opportunity for those pre-tech classes in the future. It may create some scheduling kind of hiccups that need to get ironed out in terms of their ability to access the more advanced programming at the Career Center if that's a path they choose. But it's not sort of gone forever for those kids.
Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to make sure everybody was kind of aware of what was going on.
Thanks for doing that, Steve, and for jumping right in, running. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, so the next item is discussion item, and it's to consider the language, possible language change to policy 4.2.1. And this came up as a result of wondering if the communication plan should be policy or if it could be addressed in our current policy. So I played around and I gave you two options. If you don't want those, you want to try something else, or you want to talk about it, now's the time. Or whether you don't think it's necessary is also an option. Krista.
Thank you for doing this. And I think that I like the suggestions in blue because it includes getting input, which is the piece of engagement that I think we're working hard on. So information sharing is great, but getting that input back is also really important. And then it references the communication plan, at least in the second, in 2.d. So I think it works, and I like the blue interpretation.
Okay. Oops, I gotta get back. Sorry, I went to look at. Anyone else? Steve?
So it's a little clear to me now, Don, now that I understand what drove you to do this. I was scratching my head a little bit before that. I sort of looked at this without any lens at all, and I was thinking, if this is really a board job description, it seemed to be missing some things anyway. You know, there's other things that we have to do as a board job than the two items that are listed here. That's aside from what your input here, which I agree with Kristen. I don't have any issue with the blue statements, but just for bookkeeping purposes, you know, we address organizational legal issues, we sign pay orders, we adjudicate disputes, and we monitor progress. Those are all things that are part of our job description that I didn't see here or in other sections of this 4 section. I did see that it's mentioned that we also retained the union negotiating responsibility. I had that on here and I crossed that off because that is mentioned elsewhere. That's all I've got.
Anyone else have any comments? So I've heard from 2 people. I'm not sure that that constitutes a majority. Do you
I
want to
like the blue option too. So I'll just jump in to say that I liked how number one was spelled out a bit more and soliciting feedback. So all the stuff that we've been talking about just spelled out a little more explicitly. So add myself to the list of
Okay.
people in support of that one.
Do you want to look at it again? Do you want to, we don't have everybody here. Do you want to go with the blue and come back at our next regular meeting and look at it again and then move forward if we decide as a group at that meeting?
Could be your warned version, Don.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to have it one last look at it before we move ahead.
Okay.
We
So,
put it on as an action item, and then you could always choose to not take action if it's not quite ready.
yep, that would work. Okay, so we'll look for it again next month. Okay. Next was just a discussion around board monitoring reports and the sign up. I think everybody has a monitoring report. We have them all covered. Krista, we did that at the retreat, and so if I'm assuming that you stayed where you were, but maybe not. Maybe you ended up on a different monitoring report than you've done in the past.
I think that's the same one.
Okay.
I was a little confused by this. When I click on the chart, it looks like there's the list from last year, and then this year's is empty. And I thought we signed up at the retreat for this year.
Right. So I would guess that if you looked at the work plan.
Now I click on sign up. I get FY20 and they're all filled in.
21 is blank.
Yes, I think that was because we did the sign up at the, and I just wanted something there as a placeholder. But if you look at the top of the agenda, board work plan. Wait a minute. No, it's still on the board work plan. Oh, there. Now it's working. Hang on.
Don, are you just wanting people to know which report they're responsible for and when?
Yeah. Well, I just was checking to make sure that everybody got one because I remembered some members didn't attend. That was the first piece. And then Jennifer told me that they were all taken care of. So it was just a matter to check back in to make sure that everybody remembered that they may have different reports this year than last year.
Yeah, so in the work plan, it does indicate who's responsible for which policy and when that's due. And then at the bottom of each agenda, when it mentions next agenda and policies that are due and who's responsible, that's another little reminder there a month in advance. And again, we'd like to get those probably 2 Mondays before the board meeting so that it can go out on the Tuesday before the board meeting to have it included in the packet, which goes out a week in advance.
Yeah, Jennifer reminded me this month. The only thing that was confusing was that the link you sent in the agenda, Don, it wasn't filled out.
Okay.
So I thought we were, for some reason, you were missing who was going to be doing it, and we just defaulted to last year or something.
Right. No. But so while I'm looking at the board work plan, it looks like Kevin was unity of control. And Steve, it looks like you're 4.4 school board chair role in November.
See, that's what I remember signing up for in the summer as well.
Yeah.
So I think what happened was Jennifer just took last year's list and populated it with this year.
Okay. So I'll have to check back in to see that matches.
Because if you click on your link that you put in the agenda where it says sign up, you get a spreadsheet that shows what we did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you scroll down, that same list is empty for 21. But the dates on it are, like September 11th, 2020,
okay,
due to Jennifer. But who's responsible is blank.
Yep. It's loading, but I
So I'm pretty sure she probably just went by last year.
I'll come up and say goodnight.
okay. All right, I'll look into that more and get it. Yep.
I
see.
was very happy to just do the one I did last year. That worked well. But
I'll talk to Jennifer. And so Steve, you did one for today, right?
I
Yeah.
did because she poked me to do it. And I was a little bit confused because I thought I'd signed up for something else, but then I didn't really worry about it. And
So maybe we'll just do a switch with, and we'll have Kevin take 4.4 if that works for you and if he's agreeable, and then.
yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't know where that sign up, that, the physical piece of paper ended up. I know it existed, but I don't know where it ended up. Okay. All right. And then the other thing it's a discussion is to finish the ENDS training with Susan Mogensen. That we tried so hard to make the connection work and it didn't. So we've been trying to find some dates that work for a couple of hours to have a discussion. And is everybody, I guess, first question, are we still on board with going ahead with that?
Sure.
And then, Patrick, do you remember, Jennifer was again looking at dates with her, so it'll just have to play out between all the other things that are already on the calendar kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just a matter of finding time now. So probably you could expect a doodle poll at some point with a few options to choose from. So if you can just look for that. I know historically our completion rate on doodle polls is not very high. So then we pick a date and then it ends up not working for people. So if you could just be looking for that doodle poll in the coming few days, I guess, and try to respond, we can try to get a date pinned down.
Krista.
I'm just wondering because Susan graciously extended my, privilege. I had only gotten up to like the 5th unit or something, and I really do want to complete it and talk about it. And I just don't have the capacity to do that until this community engagement stuff is launched. So is it possible while we're waiting on survey results, or, there's no real downtime, but if there's time where we've sort of put everything out and we're kind of sitting back for a month, that we could postpone it until then? Because I don't feel like I have the capacity right now.
Are you thinking that window maybe is the middle of November, Krista?
That sounds great. After October 26th,
Okay.
I'm good.
We could do a training on Black Friday.
Oh, excellent.
I'd rather do that than be shopping up in the Chittenden area.
Yeah. That's just my own, doesn't have to be exactly that, but just wanted to share that.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I don't think we are anticipating an additional executive session.
One's
So-
enough.
Yeah, are there any public left in our meeting?
No, I don't see anyone.
All right, so I'm assuming there's no
Unless
public.
Chris Pearsall has something to add as our note taker. She's also a public.
Chris, do you have a comment?
No, I'm good.
Okay, does somebody have the meeting evaluation open?
I can do it if no one else has it.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yep, I got it.
Thank you.
All right. Date of the meeting. What was the level of engagement of all board members, high or low?
Hi.
For the ones that are here, pretty high.
Yeah.
Good. Was the agenda followed? I'm gonna go with a yes.
Yes.
Comments?
Yes.
Any comments about the agenda?
We even danced through the executive session pretty handily.
Yeah, it's only a 2-hour board meeting.
Don't jinx it.
Yes.
Okay, couple more questions to go.
I forgot one really important thing.
the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for the board?
Yes.
I'm going with the yes.
Yeah,
Any comments? Good. Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments? All right. Other feedback for the chair? Okay. What went well with the meeting?
Great discussion on the facilities report, facilities committee, and great work by the community engagement committee.
I like the optimistic news of going back to school more.
Great work by the administrative team in navigating all of it.
And virtual elementary school.
Yeah.
Or whatever your academy is.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings?
Cure COVID.
that'll really put us on the map.
Oh, noted. Anything else?
It's the only thing we haven't done yet.
You can't report compliance.
All right, that's a wrap on the survey.
Thank you, Chris. All right, all those, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Andrew,
Second.
Sarah. All right, all those in favor of adjourning at 8:09, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.